It's 4th of December. Hello, everybody. I'm Naida Kuchukalic, and I will be moderating the discussion and conversation today. And this is the last event in our series of events on the topic of resisting anti-gender agenda. During November, we talked to feminists from Argentina and Germany about struggles in the reproductive rights field and access to abortion, which is additionally affected by newly chosen governments and leaderships. In the second event, we talked to scholars and activists from United States of America and Georgia about attack on the queer rights, of course, in the light of the big changes and under the new U.S. Leadership. And the most recent Georgian elected parliament. And if you're following the news, you know there are big riots happening in Georgia right now. Both episodes will be published on our YouTube channel in the next year. So if you want to keep up with our news, podcasts, and articles, make sure to follow us on social media or via newsletter if you have subscribed. We are a global unit for feminism and gender democracy from Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. And today, in the last episode, so there were 3 episodes in the series of resisting anti-gender agenda, we talked to activists, young scholars, and advocates from Serbia and Montenegro. And we're bringing actually the spotlight in the so-called Western Balkan countries or the region. And this region is now divided into countries that share the same history, which is not always the happiest one, but also share similar current right-wing forces which operate under the same playbook. One of the topics today that we will discuss is not only about the situation in these countries and the region, but also about the published book, which is called Transfeminist Playbook. And today we have authors of the book with us. Before that, I want to say that 2 weeks ago, it was exactly one of our events on Trans Day of Remembrance. We thought of all transgender, diverse, and non-binary people who have been murdered due to hate crimes. This year, 350 transgender people were killed, according to TGEU. 1 in 4 of the murdered ones were aged between 19 and 25 years old. Behind these numbers are people whose lives we failed to protect. So our guests today are co-founders and members of the Trans Network Balkans, but they also belong to their own organizations in different countries. And Trans Network Balkans is a network and trans-feminist regional movement run by and for transgender variant and non-binary people. Speaking of Trans Day of Remembrance, this regional network made a regional campaign dedicated to Trans Day of Remembrance. And I would like all of us to take a look at one of the clips that they made from the campaign. So take a look. Thank you for spending a minute and seeing this video. We will come to discussion on this video. And I already told our guests today that this is a completely another approach to Trans Day of Remembrance, where I see celebrating the life of those who are still here while remembering the ones we have lost. And it gives some kind of hope, because usually these days are very sad and we talk only about numbers, but as I said, behind these numbers, there are people. I will shortly introduce our panelists today. So with us, Jovanjoli Ulicevic from Montenegro, activist and founder of several queer feminist organizations. One of them is Asociacija Spektra. Trans Network Balkans, LGBTIQ plus Association of Queer Montenegro, etc. By vocation, biologist and ecologist, which is also very interesting when we speak about anti-gender narratives. Currently finishing international relations and humanities studies. The focus of Jolie's work is anti-fascism, queer activism, feminism, and decolonialism. Jolie also serves in the activist circle of Guerrilla Foundation. Jolie, thank you for joining and being with us. The next person that is with us, also a co-author of the book we will talk about, Aleksa Milanovic from Serbia, associate professor at the Faculty of Media and Communications in Belgrade, and the author of two books, Representation of Transgender Identities in Visual Arts from 2015, and Media Construction of Other Body from 2019, but also co-editor of the book Transgender in the Post-Universal Space, Lives, Activism's Culture, that was published in 2022. And I warmly invite you to go and look for these books. These are very valuable resources that we have from this region here. Aleksa is involved in LGBTIQ plus activism since 2020s. And last but not least, Marija Jovanovic, also from Montenegro, is with us, activist from Podgorica, born in 1997, third year in the psychology department of the Faculty of Applied Sciences, University of Donja Gorica, Montenegro, activist for the human rights of LGBTIQ plus people, one of the founders of the association Spectra. The main goal of Maria's work is, and otherwise, is communicating feminist values and mainstream understanding of the mechanisms of oppression. It's maybe a bit long, but I think it was worthwhile mentioning. We don't have many local, outspoken people who are in this region specifically. So I will go back and forth to Serbia and Montenegro. But before all that, I would like if somebody could shortly say something about Trans Network Balkans. How many countries and where did this network emerge from? So what was the need? So just in short, people know, and our communication person will be sharing links of the Trans Network Balkans and of your respective organizations and others. Whoever would like to take the floor.
Okay. Alexa is giving me a sign to start. I know his eyebrow moved. Okay, so Trans Network Balkan is a trans-feminist organization. It was founded in 2014. And basically where the idea was formed was in Bosnia. And you will remember that time because we were together there and trans people gathered to discuss the need to connect in a regional sense. And I always say, especially in feminist spaces, all imperialists are looking at this region as a region, but we are not looking this region as a region enough. We are looking it through the lens of nation states, and that is a problem. So this was the initial idea was to make a platform so that regionally trans people provide each other resources, support, etc. But it evolved a lot, I would say, because Trans Network is not a membership-based organization. It's an organization like any other. It's a collective. It's just that it is regional collective. One of our main guiding rules is that we do not overlap with local organizations. We are really nurturing synergies with all of them so that we amplify voices. So when it's reasonable, it's on local level. When it's reasonable, it's on regional level, or both. It depends. So as I said, it's a trans feminist organization, and we are quite focused on trans feminist education, supporting the emerging leadership in the region. And we basically want to support activists to be in all social justice movements. So not that trans people are only a part of a trans movement. We really want like integrative, holistic approach that trans and queer people are integral part of all social justice movement with the principles based on anti-fascism, decolonialism, and transfeminism. So that's in short. I can speak about it much longer, but I think this is enough for the start.
Thank you. So this is just to give an overview for people who are watching us maybe for the first time. There are also links, and I'm asking everybody to go and check the links. But I will go shortly. I have to go a bit back, and just to give a context of the countries that you're representing here. So I will go now to Serbia and to Alexa. And in this region, we often our office is based in Sarajevo, so we often look at Serbia as one of the biggest countries in the region. And the politics there inevitably affect their neighboring countries. So given the political climate in Serbia, especially with all these protests happening, I don't know how much people are aware of eco protests from lithium to feminist protests on femicide, etc., or in general anti-governmental protests, which are also very violent, not from the people protesting, but from the government. What would you say, how do you see that the anti-gender narratives, which is part of that fascist package, concretely affects everyday lives of trans people? And how does this influence feminists and queer activism? I've read recently that the Pride Center in Belgrade, so there is a physical space where people would come, is closed, which is, as I understood well from the media, is due to fund cuts. Of course, a big number of people were celebrating that because, we don't need this LGBTQ so-called agenda there. So my question is if Alexei could give us a context or the situation in Serbia now, which is worsening day by day, and how does it affect trans individuals in times of polarization among feminists, which is not only feminists versus trans-exclusive feminists, but also now there is a polarization in the feminist movement when it comes to wars that are happening, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, etc.
Yes, in recent years in Serbia, there has been a noticeable increase of anti-trans narratives coming from right-wing political parties, from state officials, from president, from ministers, from some left-wing and women's groups, and we even have a LGB, so without a T, group, which is anti-trans oriented group. Since you asked me about the context, if you don't mind, I would like to start with last year, and I will be brief and mention the most important events. In the mid 2023, a trans woman, actually trans teen, was murdered in Serbia, but she was at first reported missing for 20 days. Her body was found on the 6th of July in 2023. And what was very worrying at the time, and now, of course, was not only that police didn't want to do a search for her properly and do a proper investigation, but also we had a very problematic activist response in this case. In the first week of her disappearance, some LGBT NGOs publicly shared information that openly labeled her as a transgender person, which was completely irrelevant to the investigation. After that, media shifted their narrative from simple missing girl reports to reports about her past, about her transgender identity. They started publishing photos which depicts how she looked a few years ago before her social transition. And if she was live at the time, she was not, but if she was live at the time, that could endanger her more. And of course, also it could mislead everyone who saw those pictures in media. So it was evident that the police didn't put any effort to find her and in the search. And considering that all potential witnesses, her family, then the neighbors in the building where her body later was found, they were interviewed, and all of them pointed to her boyfriend, but his apartment was not searched when he was first questioned. So the community is aware of that. Police will not be looking for them because they are transgender. So on the day when her body was found dismembered in her boyfriend's apartment. The trans community gathered in the main square in Belgrade, lit candles, and that same evening, unknown persons came and tore the trans flag and forcefully removed all the candles and everything. And this event was very also, this event shook our community to its core and caused many young trans and non-binary persons to feel extremely threatened, and they are under pressure to adapt their social presentation for their safety. And note that this is all happening in the wake of two mass shootings in Belgrade and the villages very near Belgrade. Those shootings happened in May 2023, and many young people and children were killed. And this has also sparked most massive anti-government protests in recent history. Believe me, I was part of 5th of October in year 20,000, and those protests were, I think, more massive, and they were known as Protest Serbia Against Violence. And after that murder of trans teen, Collective Talas, which is the only trans-led collective in Serbia, decided to gather, I'm also part of that collective, and we decided to gather a community with banners and trans flags, and to join those protests this time, not just as individuals, but as a community. And guess what? We had to ask organizers to provide us extra security, because as a trans group with trans flags and trans banners, we were not safe among general population on protests against violence. So during that protest, we had a lot of provocations, not any violent attack, physical attack, but a lot of provocation. And this depicts where Serbia stands with general transphobia. Only a month later, our president, for the first time on a national broadcasted TV program, spoke about, negatively, of course, about woke culture, about those deviants who want, to be gender fluid or blah, blah, blah. And he promised to general population, that he will not allow same-sex partnerships or any law that could recognize, for example, neutral gender marker in our identification documents. So it was the first time that he was addressing trans issues so publicly. Before that, we were pretty much irrelevant to him, but this is the first time that he did it. After that, we have parliamentary and local elections at the end of 2023, and of course there were a lot of irregularities, and that also sparked a lot of mass protests, and people were arrested, and we were witnessing a lot of police violence on the streets of Belgrade. And then during this year, there were a lot of environmental protests against mining of lithium, as you mentioned, and now, and of course, against environmental pollution. And now we have that tragedy in Novi Sad, when 15 people lost their lives because of our government shady projects and irresponsibility towards anything that they do in our country. And we now have again a lot of protests on the street, a lot of arrests of students and young people, and all those arrests became a daily occurrence. They put those people in prisons, and they are not safe also there. And as an trans activist in Serbia, we do not have a lot of street actions, really. But in the current situation, we are more afraid to have any street action and to be on the streets, as a visible part of trans community. So Of course, there is one more thing. After the beginning of war, after Russia started the war with the Ukraine, we have a lot of trans people from Russia and from Ukraine in Serbia. There is a very big community. We are in contact with them. There are now, I think, more than 100 trans people that they are connected, and we are trying to help them, to have trans-specific health care and to seek for asylum and everything. So people here are aware what Putin did in Russia with the banning, medical transition, and people here, trans people here in Serbia, are also afraid that our government, which have very good connections with Russia, could do the same. So this is briefly what is happening in Serbia and how all those events affect us as activists and how affect the whole community actually. Because among trans and gender variant and non-binary persons in Serbia, there are a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression. People are really, really afraid, and it is visible really on our social gatherings. So they are not interested in activism. They are very afraid of that, and they just want to go to medical transition, or not go to medical transition, but be with the community somewhere in some hidden space. So, and you mentioned the closing of Pride Info Center. Our community is gathering in new office space of Talas, Collective Talas. We have that space since this summer, and we have every 2 weeks gatherings, and they are very well, attended. With people are coming all the time, and they just want to be there, doing nothing, just be there and be safe for 4 hours while event is happening. So.
Thank you. Yeah, it was Serbia was, and this is funny. You mentioned a few things. It's not funny. It's actually very sad. The narrative that's used, deviance, and using this. And of course, I know because I'm in the region and I follow the news, depopulation agenda. And this is exactly what we discussed with Susan Stryker, which is the same narratives were used in United States of America. These conspiracy theories and all that. So it's very universal, the narratives that they use. And I don't know how many people know that. I mean, I guess they know, but the Prime Minister of Serbia was a lesbian. And then, you have a president who comes and talks against same sex and talking about LGBT propaganda, just like, in Russia, and now it's happening in Georgia. But I will go now to Montenegro and to Jolie, because Jolie just this morning was also at one panel. And, for Montenegro, which is quite a small country and with small population, I think that was the first Pride in the region that I was at, the first Montenegro Pride that went without violence. And, for us, it was from us who are not in Montenegro, I always thought the situation is very good, like you base your wealth or happiness in tourism, the life goes on, small population, small country, easy to deal with things. And plus, you are the country in the region who is mostly close to EU integration process, with the exception of Croatia, that's already part of EU. So do you think that now in this last, if you catch this last train, is there a space or potential for trans-inclusive policies to be adopted, something that you're advocating for in your team, and there's a law on self-determination that you're talking a lot about? And my question would be overall, who are the main opponents in Montenegro? Because I know you often talk also about Russian proxies, and we understand the connection between Russia and Serbia, which also reflects to Bosnia. But for Montenegro, I don't know how many people know about happenings there.
Well, there are several aspects of this. One aspect is the effect on trans people's lives or women's lives. But I think one major aspect is also the instrumentalization of these topics for agendas, for political agendas. And this is something that we need more focus on. So if you ask me, like, so for example, Montenegro is one of the countries, one of the rare countries where anti-gender movement hasn't escalated yet. And why is that? It's not a coincidence. Montenegro is on a fast-track EU path. As you know, there is like a EU consensus that Montenegro is next. And all of our political actors know this very well. What does this mean? This means that they're very strategic, that they're very coordinated, that now they will not use anti-gender narratives, at least not very loud. They use it sporadically, or they remain silent. But what they do is they build their own ground infrastructure. So now is not only the last train, it is the only opportunity to push progressive feminist policies. Why I say feminist policies, because we need to like really push for the understanding that trans policies are feminist policies, and that this is like an integral issue and one of the main issues of gender equality and democracy in general, because all of these actors are anti-democratic actors who basically figured out that gender is like a super topic to manipulate and to instrumentalize for their own agendas. Why? Because it's an emotional topic. It challenges the natural order of things. It challenges the hierarchy in this society where some profit much and some nothing, majority nothing. So gender is like the connecting spot for all of these issues, and they do it in an extraordinary way. So now we're advocating for self-determination, and as I said, it's a unique opportunity to push for it. And as the same as problems have different dimensions, the solutions also have different dimensions. So one dimension of this is also practical. So it will ease in people's lives. If you have self-determination, you have conditions, prerequisite for conditions for high quality life. If you don't have self-determination, you have nothing. But the other perspective is symbolic and value-based perspective. So what does self-determination adopted in Montenegro means for the region? And that's where we come to the different influences in the region. The circle of anti-gender politics is closing in the region. Now with the Trump being elected, you don't have any West-East divide in anti-gender politics, in anti-democratic politics. There is no East versus West. They all cooperate together. Russian influence in this region is quite strong. It's destabilizing the region. And when you mention Serbia, Serbia is the main exporter in this region of these anti-democratic and anti-gender narratives. Why is that? Actually, it's Serbia and Croatia, but Serbia has influence on these non-EU countries. It's Bosnia, Montenegro, Kosovo. North Macedonia, their anti-gender movement is super strong and super vocal. What is interesting is that in the past 6 months, the anti-gender movement in Kosovo, as I am informed, has strengthened. Why is that? Because the whole region in the past year has been preparing itself for the coming back of the Trump. So this is like an intro, and I'm constantly ping-ponging between zooming in and zooming out, but I really think that this is something that we really need to do, because if we don't do that, if we only look through nationality lens and identity lens, so if I only look through the impact on trans people, I will not understand what is actually happening and why is this, why are anti-gender policies so effective. You said that these messages are universal. There's a reason for that. There are literally very structured educations, on communications for the anti-gender movement. It is not a coincidence that we had a meeting in Zagreb of previously Agenda Europe, now Vision Network. They changed their name, they rebranded. We had last year the World Congress of Families in Belgrade. So as I said, I have many other examples, but the circle is narrowing down. And I will conclude with this intro part. Do you know what is the buzzword of anti-gender movement now? Mainstreaming and human rights. And I think this is very important. That means they are co-opting many progressive things that we proposed. So that's why we need to propose more progressive policies instead of defending already established ones.
Thank you. This was really, as you said, zooming in and zooming out. And yes, yeah, this is very interesting what you said about mainstreaming, how they use basically, and this is what I heard also from very famous Slovenian sociologist, Roman Kuhar, who said they're literally using the human rights activists and defenders terminology and words, but obviously their tactics are stronger. So the reason why we gathered, among other things, is not only to put the focus on this region, is also because all three of you are authors of something that is called, translated in English, Transfeminist Playbook. So we wanted, I just also want to say for the sake of the event, that the idea was that we have the book translated and already online by today, so we can share it with the audience, but this is not the case. And the reason for that is that it was very hard for translators who are not so used to the terminology to translate very trans-feminist specific playbook. The book will be finished, definitely, and that will be a gift from Trans Network Balkans, all three of you, and people you worked with, and also Global Unit in the next year. So please do follow us or subscribe to our newsletters or to our partners, the Asociația Spectra and Collective Talas and Trans Network Balkans. So the point of the book is, like, if I would take the main key points, is you put a lot of emphasis on intersectionality. You put a lot of emphasis on that. And solidarity. So not only isolating, one struggle, which is a transgender or non-binary gender variant struggle, but, you're not isolating it from other struggles. And this is where you put this big context of human rights. And you also, when you talk about solidarity, you talk of the importance of forming coalitions, alliances, etc. Of course, the whole book is very nicely, and I'm just giving a brief overview for our people who are visiting us today. One of the most important part of that book is how to. So it's a tool for resisting these or counteracting these anti-gender movements and narratives. Exactly what Jolie said, how gender and sexuality are being politicized. Also, this was what I found also very interesting, especially in terms of the translation of the book. You put a lot of emphasis on the language, and not only in a sense of being, because the terminology and the language is a changeable thing, right? But it's about fostering the sense of belonging, of respecting all genders, at the end to say all people, so it's not only about gender doesn't only determine me, myself. So you talk a lot about inclusive language, and there are tips on resilience and practical strategies, etc. What I liked the most is, and this is what I told to some of you when I first saw the book in local language, so we call it Bosnian Serbian Montenegrin Croatian language. The book is so easy to follow and read. Like my father, who's 70 plus, can understand it, So you did a phenomenal job, and I'm looking forward when we finish the book and share it widespread. And that book also calls for action. So it's a mix or blend of theory and practical guidance for trans and feminist and queer activists and so on and so forth. So now I would go to Maria, and this is a question Anjali knows that I often ask this. And my question is always just for the sake of understanding and other people to understand, why do we put so much emphasis on transfeminism? What is transfeminism comparing to feminism for you? And how do you use that, and how do you include transfeminism in a broader feminist movement? Because I also know Maria personally, and Maria is also very outspoken, very vocal. I was listening and watching your video, giving a speech. I don't know, was it the Pride or something? You were very emotional. And to you as a feminist and trans feminist and activist, are we tired? Are feminists tired? Are queer people tired? Because we all have times of being burned down. So I would like to hear your perspective, having in mind everything that's happening. You're also quite long in the feminism, but also in activism, but also very young. So what would be trans feminism for you, and why are you dedicated so much to this?
To start, I would like to say that I really hope we're not tired, because I think we need a lot of strength and to really be awake for everything that's happening, and to really pay close attention to things. And I think that's actually a part of my answer as to why I consider transfeminism to be important, is because of all the things that are happening around us. If you asked me personally, I could never find a difference between what I feel feminism is and transfeminism, because they're the same thing. They're, for me, a concept of inclusive values, and inclusive in the way that it is our duty to look at every single aspect of a certain situation and understand how it connects to different things, and how we can never be one thing as an individual, let alone as a collective. To me, the importance of this is the thing that will make the crucial difference in whether our movements are successful. It's if we are able to look at things in all of their complexity and not be afraid to try and face it all together. So to never be selfish, to never say, oh, this is a problem I'm having, or my group or community is having, so we're going to focus on just solving this one thing. And I would love to give an example of something that we're doing in Montenegro currently in regard to the advocacy process for the law on legal gender recognition. Since the beginning of our advocacy process, we wanted to kind of approach it in this way where we do not present this as a trans issue. Of course, it will be directly influencing the lives of trans people, but we as an organization and as activists did not feel that would be an adequate way to present it to the world, because to us it represents a core value that is relatable to every single individual in our country and everywhere else. And so throughout the whole process, we put all of our efforts into very careful wording, very creative communication to make sure that not a single time did we present this as a single issue law, or a law that's addressing a single group. And to me, I think that's the core of it. Like, the value of self-determination is a universal one, and how it applies to a certain group is just one matter that needs to be included, but not the whole thing.
Thank you. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're a beautiful example of how things can be said in a very human way, you know, that people can relate and feel and not think of, you know, this ideology. And this is the reason why we call the whole a series anti-gender agenda, because that's how they call us. Now the question goes to all three of you. So what made you do this book? For me and for Global Unit for Feminism and Gender Democracy in Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, it was important to support this because usually these kind of reports or counteracting the narratives or the answers or responses are made usually on global level, you know, and it rarely touches upon, I don't know if it's applicable, I cannot say if it's applicable for every region. And that's why it was important, I think, that we have something in this region where the gender roles are still very strong, where, you know, we tend to be progressive, but maybe we're not, and we're even regressing. So how this idea came, you know, to you? What was your initial idea? What would you use this book for? I mean, because the book can be used in many ways, as an educational tool, as an advocacy tool, as a motivational tool, but what was your initial idea? How did you get there? And if all three of you could say a bit about the process of the book, writing the book.
I just want to start by saying I actually don't remember. I think we had an idea to make like posts. I think that was the initial thing, like let's post arguments and just like write our replies. I think that was it, but I'm not sure.
So you needed a tool yourself.
Yeah. No, it was I would say the frustration that because we felt that the feminist movement is always reactive and that the anti-gender movement is slashing us with the efficiency of their narratives. So, you know, when you presented the playbook on our language, it's actually the cookbook. Maria was the one who was like really going through the text several times, reminding us that we really need to simplify things, not like to banalize them. But she's always like going through materials and she's saying, okay, this is not easily understandable. Because the main weapon of the anti-gender movement is that feminist issues and trans issues are not easily understandable. So our idea was to make them easily understandable, to give a tool to feminist movements, because our experience was also that we don't have a consensus within feminist movements. What is our vision? Like, what is our proposal of progressive policies? So I'm not speaking now about consensus, for example, whether trans people are part of the feminist movement or not. So from our point of view, and you can see in our analysis, these so-called TERF narratives, we categorize them in anti-gender narratives because based on our methodology and our understanding of things, they are that. But we also, our experience shows that there are many feminist organizations who, for example, deal with violence or economic empowerment or political participation, who just didn't have the chance to discuss trans issues as integral part of their work. The feminist movement is scattered. That's the reality of things. So we really wanted to distribute the material that is easy to read, interesting to read, and that can give tools to these feminist organizations to feel more confident defending feminism and trans feminism in general. So as you can see, like there are some arguments, counter arguments, alternative arguments and stuff like that, but there are also like general guidelines on the communication, which are very valuable for us because in many occasions, we have seen that feminists just like jump on the hook of the anti-gender movement and go into that fight. Like, this is not the right terminology, this means this, this means that. We actually wanted to give a tool for feminist movements to be proactive, to propose their own narrative instead of constantly responding to the anti-gender narratives.
And if I can add something on what Jovan just said, for us in general, it was very, and it's very important in our work and in creating this as well, is that the values that we are advocating for societally are also reflected in the way that we communicate. And I think this is something that comes out a lot, is when even people who are progressive on the like on our side and stuff like that, in arguments and in trying to advocate for those rights, simply do not have like this pathway of how I should go about this and still make it in line with what I am advocating for. So I think that was also very important.
It's really a valuable resource. Alexa, in addition to this, were there any, because you also as someone who works as an assistant, were there any challenges while you were doing the research? Were there any obstacles? Did something surprise you? Did everything go as you planned? Is this what you actually wanted?
Well, actually, when we made plans for this book, we of course included more people from the region. Every research is written by two authors, and the first part of the book, that cookbook, that part was wrote from me, Jolie, and Maria. But when we were talking about what case studies to use, we have some guidelines, and I made it as a researcher, as somebody who is working in academia and who is constantly producing academic texts. And I also spoke with a lot of people who are not involved in our movement about their opinions. Where are they in the that line of thinking about this topic? And this was also one guideline that actually framed our case studies, because I think that I always advise my students also to talk about their research with the people who are not professionals and who are not into their topics, because they will ask you the most obvious question that you forget to answer, because you are into that and you are you're answering a lot but not the main questions. So we started with that, to answer the most obvious questions that people ask. I will connect this with your previous question about what transfeminism is. If you define and see feminism as a social political struggle for certain rights, civil rights, women's rights, and we can say, and we must say, that there are many different feminisms and many different movements. You have ecofeminism. You said you can do it on various different ways. But transfeminism is something, I defined it as a necessity in this moment, because we are witnessing a banalization of the feminist struggle, because a lot of people and groups that are transphobic, they label themselves as a feminists, and their struggle also include denying rights to existence to trans people, denying medical care for trans people. And this is not a feminist value. All those feminist struggles and movements and all those feminists that exist, they should not depart from the basic feminist values. And they should respect, the basic human rights, such as right to adequate health care, or, acceptance of others' self-identification. So I think that actually neoliberalism abuse and take advantage of politics of identity, and and a lot of people are not sure what to do. I'm here present in this activist scene like almost 20 years. And I was here part of the trans community before emergency of TERFs, before that public turf narratives and everything. And also at that time, in 2007, 2008, we also had at that time in Serbia that dividing of people. You know, lesbians should have their own spaces, bisexual women should have their own spaces, trans people should have their own spaces. And this is just what neoliberal tendencies are, to divide us. And with this book, we try to, you know, to address everything, to speak with everyone, not just with like people who are outside of trans community. This is also a book for trans activists to, you know, to see how they can respond to some questions or provocations, how to answer some, you know, most common questions about trans kids and about trans women in sports or stuff like that. But it is also dedicated to everyone, every citizen in our region, and I think every people in the world, every person in the world. They can read about our problems in, you know, and we framed it with a feminist methodology, because those case studies can also apply, and some of them are really easily applied to most common misogynist, sexist, you know, things that happen on a media that came from our president, ministers, governments, and the rest of the people. So we dedicated to everybody, and this was the hardest part to do it, because when every time when I write something, I want to imagine that audience in front of me, and I like to imagine you know, people who want to read this, and I'm sure that this book was read by people who are against it, but I hope that maybe some of them change their mind after they read our main comments.
Thank you. I'm thinking now I will ask Olivia, our technical support, to prepare another video from your campaign, which I think, at least to me, is very related to what I will ask you now. It's about education. So you all talk about it, and we know your target groups, and we know our target groups, and usually how they say we don't go to core right wing, or you know, people who are so stubborn in their ideology, but we go to explain to those who are not convinced or who do not understand but are willing to hear. So my very basic question, and I love how you said it, and this what Maria was mentioning all the time, and what Alexa said, I think it's what Einstein's quote when he said, if you cannot explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't know it, you can't explain it. So, because we often, people who are in activism, especially in grassroots activism, we think that everybody knows. So my question to you, while Olivia prepares the video, is who do you educate through your private life or through your work? Alexa, do you do it through your work at university? I know Yevan goes to parliaments. Maria is speaking and, you know, at open spaces. So who are you specifically targeting? Who do you go and use exactly these arguments that you have in your book? So all three of you can give your short perspective.
I think that the actual question should be, who do we not? Because as you said, like we work with the parliament and political parties. We started working with unions because we believe that this is really important, especially because a lot of unions became apolitical in the region, and we feel that they need to be more political, especially on being vocal on different issues, because if we zoom in and zoom out, we will see that workers' rights and class is also taking one of the central points of all of these trends. So this is also very important for us. Maria was actually doing a lecture for unions recently with other people from Spectra team. We're also doing with the, like judiciary, psychologists, doctors, police officers. That's why I said, who do we not educate? But also, I think it's very important to say that we are also doing a lot of educative discussions with students and young people, because this is important. I don't know, like, if you know this, but anti-gender movement is actually targeting them a lot. For example, in Montenegro, the church is gathering them with paramilitary structures. So the church is not super vocal on the issue, but on the ground, they organize discussions about abortion rights, gender identity, gender, sex, sexual orientation, stuff like that. And they bring, of course, all anti-gender actors to speak about this issue. But what is interesting is that they are doing this in spaces where they gather young people and paramilitary structures. And these paramilitary structures were, and still are, very active whenever church needs to mobilize people for protests. These people are heavily armed. They have a criminal past, war past. Many of them were like connected to different war criminals in the 90s. And one should ask themselves, like, why is this important to gather young people with paramilitary structures in the same space to discuss gender? Because they think in a long run. Like, they think about tomorrow's protests, tomorrow's voters, tomorrow's mobilization. So I think that we should also think about that. Of course, the tendency of the system is to jeopardize the educational system. The tendency of the system is also to transfer responsibility to civil rights organizations, so that CSOs provide progressive knowledge and that the system provides regressive knowledge. This is also not a coincidence. So we are trying to like figure out different ways, because like on educations, our reach is small. Like we speak with 30 people, 50 people, but like how many kids are there in the system, even in a small country like Montenegro, and not to speak about bigger countries. So we need to figure out some very creative educational tool which will be far reaching, because like these propaganda videos about everybody wanting to be a cat or a plant or stuff like that, that reaches millions. So yeah, we do a lot of educations, but we are also thinking on like how to be more in public spaces. So for example, like how CSOs are doing these educations in closed spaces, panel discussions and stuff like that. Okay, we keep that for certain purposes, but we need to do educations on the street, in the park, to use culture, to use art, in order to when you speak with someone and you do a campaign, we do a lot of online campaigns, as you know, like all feminist movements. But this is very important, and like digital activism is super important now. But at the same time, we must not forget the old school. I give you a flyer, but then when I give you a flyer, I stop you to speak with you. So this is something that we are constantly thinking and speaking about. So this on-ground work needs to go in parallel with this digital work that we do. Of course, applicable to different contexts. It's not always safe, etc., etc. But like to find a way to make it happen.
Thank you. Alexa, Maria, would you like to add on who do you educate?
Okay,
I also have some private chat questions for you, but so you know. And Alexa was very kind at the beginning to say that there are no uncomfortable questions, so I will just pose them out. I guess that's why they're private. But also I'm inviting the audience to write in the chat or raise your hand or just write privately. Yes, please.
I wanted to add that we also educate, of course, I educate students because I work with them. I educate everyone. Every trans person, when you come out as a trans, you need to educate the person in front of you. What is it? Most of the people are not familiar with that in your surrounding. But what is also important is that we educate LGBT organizations. Most of the people in the LGBT organizations are not familiar with the trans issues. They think that they are, knew a few definitions but they are not familiar with a lot. And we need them as allies, of course. We need also feminists, and we educate also feminist organizations. And I will share a example from yesterday. A local collective here in Belgrade have our own space, and we decided to share it with other organizations. And one feminist, very well-known feminist organization, asked us to, for one day, and using that space from education for their participants of some school or something. And their facilitator asked us what to do if somebody is, transphobic, but not, um, and our answer was, you educate that person. And if that person continue to, spread transphobia there, then it's not welcome anymore, because their agenda is to spread transphobia in that space. But if that person is not familiar with the trans issues, and you need to educate that person, or call us and we will do that instead of you. So this is our politics, and this is something that we were always doing. The local organization, the Trans Network Balkan, we were always open for every question, for everything, because we are aware that people are not familiar with the trans terminology. Of course, terminology also evolving all the time, and it is good thing. And we are always willing to explain. We are not offended by questions as activists, and we are trying really to do our best to provide people with answers, and to explain why some questions are not appropriate, why some questions can intimidate somebody. So we are open for that. And because of that, we are frustrated that we are all a lot of people are accusing us that we are acting like activists from Great Britain or USA. It is a different context, different activism, different everything. We are not like that. And they are, scrolling the Instagram or other social networks and see how they do it. We are doing it here in this region differently, completely different. So be aware of that.
Thank you. Maria, would you like to add? Who do you educate? I know you mingle a lot and you talk a lot with the people. So any examples from the field?
Well, Johan mostly mentioned all the groups that we as Spectra work with, but I would just like to mention literally, I think for all of us, most people in our lives are also another category, and especially the thing that I mentioned about how we communicate is something that I focus on. I do not have especially in my daily life and interaction, I don't come across people who are openly transphobic or anything, but they will in other small ways demonstrate a lack of solidarity, a lack of willingness to act upon something that they say is their value. Just they will not have the courage to openly approach a certain issue and do anything about it. So for me, it's always, or not actually always, but in most cases, I just have that internal need to try and poke around that and like inspire people to actually figure out why are you not thinking about this? Why is this not a priority in your life? So I don't know. I'm kind of getting lost in my own thoughts because I don't talk about this often. But yeah, I think it's more of that than like the like terminology and this whole other side of educating.
I think it completely makes sense what you're saying, because I think that that is the difference between the proper, if I may say it, at least on my behalf, activism is when you also provoke people to think. So, you know, and you give them arguments, but you also make them think. Unlike what the anti-gender movement does, you know, they have very straightforward lines. People just adopt it without thinking. You know, Jovan was saying about these TikToks being a cat and stuff. People just buy it, and you provoked many other questions, but I will, as we have 25 more minutes, I will ask now Olivia to play the video, please, and then I will share questions from the chat with you, and we continue.
Да. 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 Ναι.
Thank you, Olivia. The line says, based on what do we judge something or someone? So why all apples go on one side and the other one goes there? I find this short clip so educational. I mean, I had to look at it twice, you know, and this is what we're talking about. It makes us think. So I will go quickly now to some private questions. One is, I don't know if it goes for all of you, but whoever would like to, the question is why you don't work with older feminists? Why are older feminists against of trans people taking up the space? So like, as I understood, it's like taking over the feminist movement, and I assume it's about older generation of feminists. I mean, our region, the Balkan region, is well known for the feminist movement, very strong anti-war feminists, etc. So the question is why you don't work with older feminists, and why are they against trans people, if that's the case?
Well, I would say that we work with them. Actually, we really value a lot this transgenerational exchange of knowledge. We are a part of many spaces where older feminists have been and still are active, like, for example, Women in Black. So, this is just one of the examples. So, like, we really don't like believe in this shift of generations, like that every generation now needs to take over and push out the old generation. Actually, it's the opposite. We really believe in this power of transgenerational exchange. This is very important for us, yeah.
Alexa?
Yes, we work with older feminists, and I must say that in Serbia there are a lot of older feminists who are like icons of lesbian and feminist struggles, and we as a trans persons and trans activists, with most of them try to explain them our position in and our and what transphobia means and everything, but some of them refuse to take it seriously, or they just have their own idea of how feminist struggle should look like, or and it is very complicated when you take into account all the LGBT activism, because if you have uneducated LGBT groups and the older feminists who refuse to educate themselves and to accept some things, then you are against the whole movement, and you are always somehow outsider, and you are for years a lot of people allow transphobia in LGBT and feminist spaces. And now we decided to not allow it anymore. We allow, as I said at the beginning of this panel, we can we allow every question, but we will leave the room after we answered you that it is not correct to deny somebody's identity, or to misgender person on that name, that trans person. It's not okay. So we are not accepting it in that way, but we are trying to work with them, and we are mostly them are in Serbia, they are trying to push us out and divide feminist struggle from trans struggle. So this is the big problem. But we have a lot of older feminists who are very accepting and very trans friendly, and they are allies. So it's not black and white.
Thank you. I see one hand. There are 2 questions in the chat, and I have 2 more. Daria, please.
Thank you so much for your insights. I would be interested in maybe one example from the book, one narrative that is like an anti-gender narrative that is being counted, maybe your favorite one, or the one that you use the most or something, so that we get like an idea of what we can expect in the book. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so mine is divide and rule, like, because I see these anti-gender actors increasingly using a human rights approach and defending women from gender ideology. And this patronizing move is actually succeeding in some spaces. And that means how they co-opt everything that we do. Why I feel that this is very efficient for them is because it's very reasonable that we are afraid of losing hardly won rights. And that gives them the tool to say, okay, see, even women are against this. So we proposed there some arguments, and not only arguments, but like our view of feminist policies, which are holistic and integrative. Like, how is transphobia actually misogynist? How is it damaging women? How debates on human rights are actually legitimizing fascism. So these are, okay, this was actually a sneak peek into my favorite part.
Any other comments? Because I can, yeah, Maria, please.
Yeah, I can add one, but Jovan kind of stole it from me. But there is one regarding the like free speech and like the idea that criticizing trans people and like I don't know what's the English word, but like questioning the validity of this experience is a democratic practice. And to me, it's my favorite because it's so ridiculous that people go this far, and this is something that we've mentioned tonight as well, is like taking one idea completely out of its context and like making it void of all of its true value. and using it for a specific purpose. So we also addressed that in the chapter of arguments.
My favorite part is, of course, the one that we explain a lot of terms like what is gender ideology, what is TERF, and because when even when I'm teaching, I always start with terminology, and I like to explain where and when that term is coined and what its meaning of that term. And after that, we can discuss evolution of that term, everything that happened to that term and how people now use it in the media or in academia or in activism. So this is very important for people to understand. Understand this book is to, educate themselves about what is like anti-gender and when TERF is, acronym is coined and who coined it. It was coined by a cis feminist, not a trans person. So it is very important to, have that terminology explained. And this is my favorite part.
Thank you. This was inspirational. It also helps others. I will refer to two questions in the chat. So one is, so this is for all of you, people thanking you for the session. What are the biggest lessons you learned through your activism? And the other one is, what approaches have worked the most in your activism? So biggest lesson, sometimes lessons are hard. We take a hard one to learn something. And which approaches have worked the most? So whoever.
Okay, I'm fast on mine. But two things. To be strategic. As I said, we are often reactive, and that is reasonable, but this is not doing wonders for us. So to be strategic, like everything is strategy, the timing, the narrative, it needs to be intentional. And I know that we often don't have time for this, but we need to make time for this. This is one thing. The other thing is refusing debates. So oftentimes people agree to debate with anti-gender actors because they fear that this is the only space they get. We actually refused these debates with the risk of not having the space, but this actually was beneficial for us because in this way we delegitimized these actors. We refused to legitimize their opinion and their arguments as actual arguments because you can't fight them. Media feeds of sensationalism. We give them that if we accept the debates. So, and these are not the people that are going to present arguments. They are going to like have the platform for sharing their emotionally fueled propaganda, and you can't fight that with arguments. Like you literally can't. You're just giving them legitimacy with your integrity. So we refused these debates, and this was because like we see, for example, in Montenegro and in the region that the how to say that test of you being democratic is your ability to tolerate chauvinistic attitudes. And this is not democracy. Like there is no absolute free of speech. If we allow this, we are actually supporting the right-wing vision of free speech. So it takes wisdom to like say no. We are not going to be a player in this kind of play. So these were, I think, like the main lessons, and to be proactive, out of fear, okay, so our first strategy, for example, for self-determination was do it low-key. But then we spoke with North Macedonian activists. For them, this strategy was disaster because anti-gender movement won that battle because their narrative was efficient, because the feminist movement was advocating behind the doors. And the parliament switched in a moment. Our strategy was to be very proactive and to speak about the law whenever we can, but focusing on values and principles of self-determination. Like focusing, not, as Maria said, not on like spiking empathy with people, like, okay, poor trans people, support them by supporting this law. No, like people need to understand what this kind of law, even if they're not going to use it, why is this beneficial for them? Or any feminist law, why is it beneficial for the whole society? So these are like some of the strategies and lessons that we used. Yeah.
Thank you. Shortly, Alex and Maria. So biggest lessons and what approaches have worked the most?
I will say it now because as Johan was speaking, like every other sentence, I was like, oh yeah, that has a point. And then I was thinking about like a different lesson. So it was very hard to choose. But for me, it was to kind of find the middle ground between being idealistic and pragmatic, because I am a very big dreamer, as you would say, and I always have this huge ideas as to what we need to accomplish and what our goals are, and in the end of the day, what's good enough. And especially when there is not many people working on certain topics, I think we often have this tendency to overburden ourselves with everything that we need to do. So just in like making our movement sustainable in a way that we manage our expectations and our goals to just prevent burnout and a complete and utter lack of hope that I think hits us all at times when we see that we really cannot do everything that we see needs doing. So that would be one thing. And the other is always keeping in mind why we are doing a certain thing, because I think it's from one side, it's very easy to get lost in like just having a goal and like trying to go after it and sort of losing sight of all the genuine deep motivation that it came from. And I think also this is a very big thing in like what impacts movements to fall apart, because people set certain goals, they go after them, and then when that goal is accomplished, it's like, okay, problem solved. And I don't think any any of the issues we are trying to solve work like that. So it's just like this constant presence in what's going on and what we can do, and what's the next thing. So just not fixating on something as the solution, but rather seeing the process as the end goal itself. And I forgot what was the other question.
So it was about activism, the biggest lessons, and approaches that worked the best.
Oh, when it comes to approaches, I just think everything that we said tonight is literally that, like trying to use a language that everyone understands, trying to be, I don't have the word dosljedan, kako se kaže?
Consistent.
Yeah, consistent in following your values and not allowing yourself to break them for any purpose, and yeah, just keeping the work going, whatever happens.
Alexa?
Everything what Jolie and Maria already said, but one more thing to add is to my lesson. The biggest lesson is to save energy and be aware that there is just a few of us, and like millions of people who are not informed or transphobic and everything. And we can do everything in a day or in a year, and we need to be patient and stay positive in this, even though after some events, you know, you are sitting on some panel and asking questions, and after that you have that questions in your head for days and for nights, and you are, you know, not just exhausted after the panel, but days after that, and sometimes months, because there are always people who will sit in front of you and question your identity, and you are patient and you are answering everything, and you are losing your energy with trying to be, you know, patient and polite and everything. And one more lesson is that stay calm. Do not allow them to provoke you, because you will get nothing if you are you know, if they see that you're intimidated, and if you lost it and do something, you know, that then they will accuse you of violence or something like that. And it is not easy to sit with other, especially younger trans persons, who are literally shaking during those panels, because they are so intimidated and so stressed out. But I think this is also a good one of the strategies that we propose also in this Transfeminist cookbook, and also in educational work on, you know, on panels, on media, on everywhere, when we have opportunity to teach about these things. So
thank you. This all what you said, I mean, we will have recording of this, and it will be on the YouTube, because there are so many lessons to take from you. We're at the end of the time for this panel at least. And with this, what Alexa was saying, how to stay, you know, strong and resilient and keep strength. This is a whole new panel we have to organize only to discuss these strategies. I will go to the last question in the chat, which, and thank you, Karin, and thank you, Aida and Grace, for the previous questions. Karin asks, and I had one of these questions also for the panelists, have there been completely unexpected allies in your activism? Like people, organizations you would have never thought of networking with? So any completely unexpected allies? And my question was reversed. My question was, that I have prepared for you is, did some allies drop out? So either way, please, shortly, because we don't want to keep people waiting too long.
Okay, so we are, I think, like one core strategy that we have is building wide coalitions. So I would not say that anybody actually surprised me, because you know, like before there was this strong concept that trans people for trans rights, women for women's rights. But for years now, we are actually shifting this paradigm, like trans people, queer people, women for the society. So from that point of view, our coalition is of allies or accomplices, if you want, is quite big. You know, I can't recall anyone who actually surprised me. There were some people who remained silent at some moment, who didn't want to like sign the support. Recently, there was this, we gathered a huge support for the whole civil society in Montenegro to support the self-determination law. And majority, I would say 90% of credible organizations and individual activists who are really like a name in Montenegro have signed this. But there there have been some who didn't sign, but we were like, okay, they will come to it at some moment, you know, like for this reason or that. There were some like I don't want to name, but like there were some movements that we actually supported a lot. They didn't support this. Actually one concrete movement. But I think that this is more a question of the concept of solidarity. Is it transactional or not? Then it is the understanding of self-determination, trans people, feminist policies, and stuff like that, you know, like because they thanked us for the huge support they got from us, but they said like we still don't feel like confident to support you on this issue. But we have basically responded to them like, no need to thank us because solidarity is not transactional, you know, like we will continue supporting you. So like, as I said, like we are really building a wide coalition. And one actually advice that I got from one activist who is active for, I think, 20 years, she told me at one moment, because I am famous for being for having a high temperament, and I take things to heart. And she said to me, Jolly, in politics, there are no friends and enemies. Like, think strategically. That I constantly come back to that. And you know, like sometimes coalitions don't need to be firm. Sometimes they are fluid. Sometimes we go apart, then we go together again. But as I said, like I think it's very important that we are intentional and strategic in this.
Thank you. This is exactly how Susie Stryker thinks when I had the conversations with her. We may meet at one thing, you know, not agree on something else, but the unity is important. Alexa, please, shortly, any new unexpected allies?
Well, no, maybe I have to mention people from institutions, but not the people on positions to have big influence on changing rights or something like that. But we are always surprised when we go to some meeting and you have, you know, people who are willing really to help. For example, in Serbia, we have that chief of, I don't know how to say it in English, matična služba, people who are give you changed birth certificate, and the chief of that service, she was like, I understand everything, and the law is completely absurd, but I can do nothing because our other clerks have to do what the advocate, what their law person who are, you know, reading the law says. So we are not the door that you should knock and enter. You need to, you know, work with the ministry, that and that. So we are always surprised when, you know, people from general population are so open, and when they show that they understand everything and our struggles and problems. And of course we are really shocked when people who are in positions to make some decisions about our rights are completely uninformed about that. So it is a paradox. And that's it.
Thank you very much. As we're over the time, I will just close with Dere will close the series, but before that, I just want to sum up somehow. So the election year is over. There is still a presidential election in Croatia, which is our region, and that will be interesting to see because politics shapes our lives. So we know who our enemies are. We know how they work. We know what they say. With your Trans Playbook, we have the counter arguments. In one word, to all three panelists, what would be the first immediate step for all of us to do? One word. As our panelists from Argentina from the first panel said, nobody said this is going to be easy. So
Okay.
the fight.
Restructure.
Thank you.
I have no clue. If you
Resist.
wait for another hour, maybe I will choose one.
I understand. It was a long day, and I'm thanking everybody who joined us. I always think about, and I asked this in the previous panel, is peaceful resistance possible with the times coming? Because one of the questions was, I don't have time for that now, is Serbia becoming new Georgia? Which is, you know, not a good thing. And then I'm thinking about the stone wall, and are we going back to those times where we have to go back to the streets? I thank you deeply, Jovan, Jolie, Alexa, and Maria, especially Maria, having you, Jolie and Alexa, we see quite often, for joining us. I'm also thanking everybody who joined us to listen to it, and I'm giving my last word to Daria, our Director of Global Unit for Feminism and Gender Democracy.
Thank you so much. I mean, firstly, I want to thank you, Naida, for putting together an amazing series. We have learned about resisting the anti-gender agenda with reproductive justice, with LGBTQI+ human rights, and now we closed it, I think, in the most hopeful way, because, you know, the first two sessions also summed up how difficult the situation is, how spaces are already closed or closing, and sometimes you tend to lose hope and, you know, repeating how horrible everything is, which is important. But I think this session gave me a lot of hope that, you know, we can't just get tired now. Actually, now we have to, as Jolie said, restructure. And what I really like, this is maybe what I take away from this, is that you said, Jolie, you said we should not only react and defend the achievements, but we should actually propose progressive politics and not be scared to continue to do that. And that's basically what we also will do together with you, also in the future. And stay tuned for our anti-gender resistance work next year. And please follow us to get the playbook in English in case you don't speak the language that it's originally in. So thank you so much to the panelists, also to the translators, and to Adna, our amazing communication coordinator. And have a good rest of the year.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.